Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to step onto the ice for some biscuits and penalties. I'm your host, Alex, and joining me as always is Cobra. Say hi, Cobra.
Hey, what's up, Alex? How we doing, man?
Doing good. Is excited to get into the playoffs as we've waited a long time for this and speculated for 3 or 4 months now of what could be of the playoff picture. But now it's in fruition and it has come true in front of our very eyes.
Not only that, but the Stanley Cup playoffs are, in my humble opinion, the most exciting stretch for for a championship of all time because you have 16 games to get to a trophy, but a long road to get there. The Stanley Cup is one of the most exciting trophies to ever witness. It's also a heavy trophy too. 30 pounds of solid silver. But players lift it with broken bones, broken arms, and it weighs like a feather to them. It's just that impressive how they can do it. And the Stanley Cup is a beautiful trophy, over 100 years old. You gotta love it.
Definitely. And in terms of some off-season, pre-off-season news, per se, in terms of before the playoffs start, Washington Capitals captain Alexander Ovechkin, after breaking the record and have say currently, I believe, 897 goals, said yesterday that he ain't going nowhere into the retirement home and nowhere near leaving the Capitals as he closely approaches 900 goals to make the record harder to break. What are your thoughts about Ovechkin returning to the ice next year to try to push 900 goals and see how far he can push that record?
First off, to be fair to Alex Ovechkin, um, I hope he does. I hope he does go further beyond just 897. All right. Um, Second off, it's clear he still hasn't. He is slowly winding down. So I don't expect him to play any longer. After after 40, he's not going to pull a Chris Chelios. Let's call a spade a spade. But you know, I also don't think Ovechkin after he leaves after he retires, I don't think he'll leave the Capitals front office. I think he'll forever be a Washington Capital, which is a good thing to be fair. Ovechkin is Ovechkin, and I've always liked Ovechkin even though I'm not a Capitals fan. But, it's just hey, Father Time is undefeated. We'll see how far Ovechkin's body can take this, but it's all up to him. It's all up to him. It's all up to his body. Um, I hope he does this, for at least another year or two before his uh before his contract becomes an albatross around the neck of the Capitals. So good luck, good luck, Ovi.
Definitely agree. And Father Time is definitely sport, with Tom Brady playing into his early 40s, Ichiro playing into his late 40s, and many other greats still playing now, like LeBron James with his son intimately playing alongside him. We never expected to see. And Franco almost played with his son, but he ended up retiring before he got out of college. And with the playoffs starting tomorrow, we are going to break down some of the biggest questions that I have for me and Cobra, and some of the curses that are pretty big in terms of the playoffs, like the President's Trophy curse. Because every team that wins the President's Trophy has never won the Stanley Cup since the Blackhawks did it in 2013. The Jets have been tasked to win the Stanley Cup this year by winning the President's Trophy. Do you think the Jets are going to break the curse this year, or is the curse going to live on like the conference curse does when teams touch it and don't win the finals, or touch and don't touch it and still win? Basically, do you think the Jets are going to be able to break the curse of the President's Trophy this year?
That's tough to say. considering they're in the Western Conference, and the Western Conference is definitely offensively stacked. It's a tall task for Hellebuck, who I definitely have penciled in as the top uh, recipient of the Vezina Memorial Trophy, as the top goaltender in the NHL. But again, it's a tall task. I don't see the Jets breaking the curse of the President's Trophy this year, unfortunately. Just because there are so many good teams in the Western Conference that could stack the deck against the Jets. That's my opinion.
I definitely agree. The Western Conference is one of the hardest conferences to get out of to go to the Stanley Cup as opposed to the trophies because we all seen what teams do in the Western Conference over there in the playoffs. They thrive for high-powered and really fast offenses, and I'm hoping Hellebuck can lead that team to the promised land, the Stanley Cup. Because I think the Jets are looking for another Stanley Cup in a really long time. I can't remember the last time the Jets won it in the past,
They
15.
never won it. The Jets have never won the Stanley Cup.
Oh wow! So even a bigger task for Hellebuck and the boys in Winnipeg.
And also, yeah, they haven't won the Winnipeg Jets. I think the only time they've won a championship was in the WHA when they were part of the World Hockey Association. I think. Don't quote me on that. But I will also say that this is not the original Winnipeg Jets from old, if that makes sense. This is technically the team reacquired that were the former Atlanta Thrashers. So really think about that. That is, so in all the franchisee history, they have. I don't think the Jets have made it. The Jets haven't even made it to the Western Conference Final. I don't think so. This is going to be interesting. Will they get that far? I really don't know.
And on the topic of the playoffs starting tomorrow, I want to know what your top three series are that you're most excited to watch out of both conferences. What are you going to be watching close and hyped about starting tomorrow with Stanley Cup Playoffs? What three series are you watching the closest?
Well, I'm going to say I'm going to be putting an eye right to the Hurricanes versus the Devils. Look, the reason why I say I'm putting an eye right to it. This is the first time that the Devils have an elite goaltender in net, not named Martin Brodeur. Say what you will about Corey Schneider. Corey Schneider was was past his prime at that point. But Jake Allen coming into his own as an elite goaltender with the Devils definitely seems to be good for New Jersey. They needed the championship caliber success that they have been missing. I'm also going to keep an eye on the Toronto Maple Leafs series because memes. I want them to kind of lose in the first round because it's the Maple Leafs and we all deserve to turn them into Maple Laughs. And of course, the Minnesota Wilds series is the last one I'm looking at. It is the last year of Marc-Andre Fleury. So we'll see what happens. Let's see how far the Wild can go too.
I've been interesting lists from Cobra. My number three series that I'm going to keep a close eye on is the Oilers and the Kings. The Oilers are trying to bounce back from the heartbreaking comeback last year against the Panthers that they couldn't complete. The Panthers ended up winning the cup. The Kings haven't been in this position in quite a while to try to push to give LA a championship for the first time in seems like forever because California has been decimated with bad sports teams that can't do anything. And yes, I'm talking about the Lakers winning the bubble because that doesn't count for anything.
Hold up. I think you're forgetting about the Rams winning the Super Bowl a couple years ago, my friend. Pump the brakes on LA and California being cursed with championship drought. Pump the brakes, Alex. Wow.
And I do want to see McDavid and Leo Drysdale finally cross that line of being able to be called Stanley Cup champions. They are, I think, both for lifers on the Oilers right now. Can't remember Drysdale's career list, but I know McDavid is a current Oiler and forever lifer of the Oilers. My number 2 series to watch is the Blues and the Jets. The Blues have been playing like it's 2019 all over again, with Jordan Bennington being in goal and knocking down on all cylinders, locking that net down. The Jets are coming off of one of the best seasons I've ever seen the Jets do, with one of the best goalies in the league. This is going to be goalie versus goalie in the net. I believe the Jets start off the series in the first 2 games because they end up winning the President's Trophy, so they have home ice. And we know Canadian teams, they play well in Canada, and it's going to be scary. And I think it's going to be a very tight series.
Oh, and if I can add to your Blues Jets matchup as well, these are the same parameters the Blues had that made them win the Stanley Cup. Fired their coach earlier in the season. Start winning. Start rattling off. Oh, you're in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Binnington's returning to form. Okay. This has happened before. So, only difference is there's no Boston.
Oh, yeah. And my number 1 series that I'm going to be closely watching is not the Capitals Canadian series, because I think the Capitals are going to get the job done against the Canadians. But the Battle of Florida Part 2 is looking very more intriguing this year. Burakovsky versus Vasilevsky. Brent Marchand's first playoff series in the Panther jersey. What can he do to catapult the Panthers to win back-to-back? And try to do what the Lightning did a couple years ago. Go for a three-peat. Go for something that we haven't seen done since, I believe, the Penguins did it when they went back-to-back in the early 2010s. Very interesting matchup and a very in-home feeling like you saw last year. I'm very intrigued to see how this goes. The Lightning have struggled. They seem to always sit at that 2 spots. They can never get over the hump and win the Atlantic Division. And it'll be a very intriguing matchup to watch them play the Leafs or the Senators in the second round. So definitely a lot of good series to watch. Definitely a lot of fun to keep track of. And some history could be making with some teams that haven't won the Cup yet, like the Jets, the Wild, and a few others. And the Canadians will try to go after, I believe, the 25th Stanley Cup, which is insane for hockey. Canadians had a stranglehold in the early, I think, 30s and 40s of the hockey world, winning everything. So definitely fun to talk about.
Right. I did also want to add before we start winding things down, Alex. This is of course the Friday before Easter. So I did want to remind our listeners that if you are listening to us, sorry about the delay. Our sound editor, Keith, our sound man, he's on Easter vacation, so he will be when he will be editing this when he is off break. Just wanted to give that heads up.
For sure. And one more question before we wrap it up here. Where do you think, which conference do you think the Cup will come out of, and who do you think out of each conference has the best chance? I think the Western Conference has the better chance of winning, but what are your thoughts about that?
I think it stays in the East. I think it stays in the East. That the Western Conference may have more more defense, but the Eastern Conference has more firepower. I think the strongest spear versus the strongest shield. I think the strongest spear wins again.
Definitely an interesting opinion from that. Anything you like to add to anything we talked about tonight before we wrap it up? Any more things you want to bring up before we get into tomorrow of the first two games? I think the first game is the Jets and the Blues series. So anything else you like to talk about before we wrap it up here?
Yes, it is Jeff Skinner's first playoff appearance. Jeff Skinner had been on bad Carolina Hurricanes teams. Of course, he was on the Sabres for a while with a bad albatross of a contract for 2016. And now he is on a proper playoff team with the Oilers, I believe. So he finally gets to experience what playoff hockey is all about. And also, of the playoff beards will definitely be out today. I think there will be some players who have very good playoff beards this year. It's going to be very interesting seeing Ovechkin with the salt and pepper look as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that, Alex.
We do have a player who's going to retire after Stanley Cup playoffs. David Savard will retire following the Stanley Cup playoffs. He announced he plays for the Canadians, so after the playoffs are over, depending on how far the Canadians go, Savard will be retiring. 34-year defenseman has decided to hang up the skates after this year's playoffs. Now, I'm not too familiar with him because I'm not that big into hockey just yet, but I do want to see the Canadians do well, even though that means sacrificing my Caps chance to win everything. But what is your opinion on David Savard retiring after the Cup playoffs this year at only 34 years old?
Well, he's a defenseman for one thing. Defensemen do a lot more as far as physicality is concerned. Like people sleep on defensemen, but defensemen really, they block the shots. They have a very hard slap shot. You know, from the point, they also quarterback power plays. They do a lot of things, and it is very, very tough. It is very, very rare, sometimes for defensemen to have long careers. But a lot of them do. It's just they have a lot of wear and tear after their playoff career is over. But I will also add, we know about Fleury's retirement. After this season, so we're gonna definitely see some very interesting moves this year. When it comes to retirements, this could also be Brad Marchand's last year, depending on if he wins the Stanley Cup or not.
Definitely,
But
and Brady Marchand is no more familiar than winning the Stanley Cup before because he's won it before with Boston and
he's won it twice I think he's won it twice with Boston.
yeah,
I think once in the Tim Thomas era, and the other in the other when Tuukka Rask took over.
Figueroa being one of the better goalies for the Bruins in their history. I was a big Figueroa fan, even though I'm a diehard Caps fan who hates the Bruins more than I hate the Penguins. When they lose, I laugh at them. I'm like, ha ha, take that.
Although, yeah, like I said, you really should be hating the Penguins because, oh hey, it's always the Penguins who eliminate you out of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Kind of had to give you a little bit of a dig there. Also, Tuukka Rask always delivered the laughs against Toronto because he was originally a Toronto Marley. He was in their pipeline.
That is an
He was
interesting move.
he was in their pipeline, but they gave him up for Andrew Raycroft Andrew Raycroft, who the Bruins were going to waive anyway, and they were putting all their chips in the Justin Pogge basket, and Pogge basically pogoed out.
Very funny opinion on the Bruins, and obviously another year of disappointment for the Bruins after missing the Stanley Cup Playoffs this year, losing last year. I think in the second round because they seem to always beat the Maple Leafs and then lose in the series afterwards. I don't know how that's possible, but the Bruins were Bruin.
Yeah, well, and also they decided in the offseason to cut the wrong goaltender.
Oh, I
they had two number one
force.
And now Linus Ullmark is playing with the Ottawa Senators in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
With all that being said, it was time to wind down Biscuits and Penalties. If you want to watch the NHL Championship and any other sport championships, there's a lot of playoffs starting. Make sure you use Fubo TV, and if you do, use our link in the bio wherever you get our podcast from. Like to plug out other podcasts, the Hard Count, our football podcast with a special draft episode next week after the draft to break down our favorite teams' picks and what we thought of the entire first round. The Lap Down on NASCAR podcast, hosted by Greg when they talk NASCAR, Xfinity Series, I believe, and Truck Series, and most likely other racing leagues as well. So tune into that one. Our Social Slam podcast, our wrestling podcast, coming back next or 2 weeks from now, the 27th, for a WrestleMania breakdown of all WrestleMania news for night 1 and night 2, and what we expect to happen later on in the year with new champions crowned, new opponents for the championships, and what we expect Triple H to do after, with the twist that he's not doing as well running WWE as famous women respect to Vince McMahon.
No, hold up, Alex. You got to do it right. Famous women respecter Vince McMahon.
Alternative
do it right.
Alternative podcast hosted by Kat, which will be coming up as well next week. So we're gonna get a double header for you listeners out there that like both hockey and baseball. Look out for both of those. We're on Spotify, YouTube, and TikTok. However long that lasts for, because we all know the government sucks and they don't like us to have a Chinese app.
They don't like us to have fun unless they're profiting off our fun.
And wherever you get your podcast from, that is it for Biscuits and Penalties. We had to step off the ice, unfortunately, because I see the Zambino.
Zamboni! It's the Zamboni!
The Zamboni, excuse me, my non-hockey language talk. And we're going to be excited to see you guys next week when we go over part of the first round. Goodbye, everybody.
Take care, everyone.